This is March 19th, 2026, maybe the whole meeting of the Glencoe Village Board. I'll call the order now. Let's have a roll call, please.
Trustee Hallwire. Here. Trustee Mealopoulos. Here. Trustee Underdown. Here. Trustee Rosenblatt.
Here.
Trustee Rubin. Here. Trustee Scott.
Here.
President Rowan.
Here.
We're not live streaming the meeting tonight, but the video recording will be available on the village's YouTube channel pursuant to our public comment rules. Because we have a regular village board meeting immediately after this meeting, we're not going to have public comment on non-agenda items. The regular meeting is 7 o'clock. If you have a comment on an agenda item, then we'll ask you to make that comment at the time the agenda item happens. And all comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we'll notify the speaker when the time is up. The first item on the agenda is the discussion of the Preservation Commission recommendations regarding enhanced preservation incentives. And I'll ask our Preservation Committee Chair, Peter Van Vechten, and our Assistant Village Manager, Adam Paul, to present. Welcome, Peter. Adam's always welcome. Take it away, guys.
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to start at a high level for just a moment. This was in an article this past Monday in the New York Times, and it's a little bit paraphrased, but it gets at the heart of why are we here tonight on this discussion? Neighborhoods and communities can still provide a sense of home. To say I'm from Glencoe, that's not just on a map. It conveys a deep sense of history, belonging, and meaning, and a personal identity for each individual. It's one of the primary ways people answer the basic question of who they are and where they belong. Now, in all fairness, this was an article that had nothing to do with Glencoe, but it was talking about the design of cities. And the reason I thought this was appropriate this evening is because if you think about the neighborhoods in which we live in, they're created out of the sense of nature around us, but it's also about the built environment. So when we walk down our blocks and we have a memory of what that is, what it was 15 years ago, it's about what is built there, how was the street formed, what trees were there, and so on. So at a high level, it's why we're here right now to talk about this. And I think there's a sense of identity that each one of us have, because everyone in this room has been in Glencoe for a while, and we all have this sense in our heart. And if they ask you, where are you from? And you say, I'm from New York. There's a different sense in your head. What does that mean? When you say we're from Glencoe, anyone in the North Shore understands instantly what does that mean.
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to mention that this has been a sustained conversation with the board over the last several months, and I think the Preservation Commission and my work with them, they have taken your feedback to heart and have incorporated that feedback into what's before you this evening. We have presented several things before you in the past, and I'm not going to kind of regurgitate that. I think I just want to get straight into what we're presenting this evening. What the Preservation Commission has developed is an incentive pilot program. This is a 3-year program, and the purpose of the program is to encourage voluntary investment in landmark properties. As proposed, the program is funded at $30,000 on an annual basis. It's a voluntary participation for qualifying projects that residents are interested in doing. The purpose of the program is to remain revenue neutral. I know we heard that from the village board at our presentation back in August. So as part of this program, we're also proposing a permit fee rebate. A demolition fee. What's proposed is the establishment of a new fee for demolition, a $3,000 fee for standard home demolition, and a $5,000 fee for honorary landmarks. Over the last 3 years, the village has averaged above 10 demolitions or 10 rebuilds per year. So we're ranging between 10 to 13 homes over the last 3 years in demolition, which would sustain funding for this pilot program over the next 3 years. As the program is formed, it's a permit fee rebate. It's for projects in excess of $50,000. It allows for a maximum allowable rebate of $10,000 per project, per property, and it's confined to one project for one property owner. We are proposing some recapture provisions upon partial or whole demolition. So, for example, if somebody receives an incentive and they later want to demolish the home, we would have some recapture provisions as part of this type of program. I want to hone in on the projects in excess of $50,000. The Preservation Commission discussed this at length. We had a wide range of conversations between what would be a appropriate or proper permit fee rebate. I think that we want to, the commission wants to provide funding for projects that are going to actually allow residents to want to stay in their homes and not demolish homes. Substantial projects, substantial remodels. That's kind of what this program is geared towards. So that's kind of why we honed in on that $50,000 as part of our project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to kind of talk about our the secondary incentives that the village board had referred to the zoning commission.
So in a way, these kind of work together. And there was a comment last time about affordability. And so Adam just touched on that a little bit in terms of revenue neutral. This one would not incur costs to the village per se, but it was an idea to create more zoning flexibility for homeowners, for landmarks. In other words, the zoning code today has some flexibility, but this would increase that flexibility both for area and in terms of setbacks. And we'll get too granular on that, but the concept there is to give a little flexibility for people with landmarks, and then combined with what Adam just talked about, there is okay, here, you can do this if you're a landmark property. The village values this, values your property, values your home. And so the idea is to create a little more potential for that. The zoning commission reviewed this in 2 meetings and approved it. The process is that it would be a 2-step process. The Preservation Commission would review it based on standards that pretty much exist in the certified landmark code, which were also based on standards that were developed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. So these are not controversial. They've been around for decades. And then in addition to that, a waiver of the application or appearance review fees while going through this process. Those fees, while nothing, but those are smaller in terms of economic incentives, but it would certainly help the process. In addition to that, we would like to amend the advisory review meeting requirements that are currently in the code. As you all know, the code has 2 levels of landmark status: certified, which are very detailed in terms of requirements, in terms of attendance and what's being asked for an application. While interestingly, the honorary is pretty silent on that. It doesn't say you need to turn in the elevations for what you're using, what the floor plan is, so on. And so what this is doing is saying, okay, let's prescribe what the requirements are, but let's also require attendance by the owner or their representative at an honorary review meeting. Right now, what's been the commission's experience is that when homeowners desire to do something with their property, they almost always come because they're very interested in commentary. When a builder applies, they almost always never come. I've been on this commission for a long time, since junior high school, it feels like. And I think there's been 3 builders that have come. And the whole point of this is to be able to have a discussion about, can we talk about alternatives to demolition? Have you considered this? Have you considered that? It's not demanding that they do anything. It's an honorary review. It's an advisory review. The certified landmark review is much more strict, where the commission can be very specific on what would qualify and what it can't. The other one is much more of an advise you, with professionals in the field, lots of experience. And so it's the opportunity to do that. Right now, they don't have to. So we're suggesting modify the code so that attendance becomes mandatory. Okay, next one. Demolition delay. Right now, on the North Shore, there are a number of communities that do not have a demolition delay because you cannot tear down a landmark in its communities, at least in Wilmette, like Forest, for example. In other communities, if you desire to do that, there is a demolition delay period. And Glencoe does have one. Today it's 180 days. It has grown over time. It started out being a rather modest amount and then it bumped up a bit. Now today it's basically 6 months. Our other neighbors all have time periods that are longer than that, roughly double. When you dig into it a little bit, Winnetka recently updated theirs, a year ago or so, from 180 days to what turns out to be more like 330 days in practice because they have some processes they have to go through. So almost a year. Highland Park has a different system altogether. They vote on whether it should be a landmark based on the number of criteria that the house meets, or that the building meets. So if it meets 1 criteria, that's 1 level of landmark status. If it meets 6, that's a different level. We don't do that here. But in Highland Park, at the higher level, they are at 1 year demolition delay. And so the logic here is to kind of level the playing field in the North Shore, and so that we're not seen as, by the builder community necessarily, as being an easy target to come after because it's only 6 months. The experience from the Preservation Commission has been that 6 months is just about the right amount of tee-up time that a builder needs to get everything in line. So they get their financing, they get the building permit ready to go. Oftentimes when they submit the plans, there are some corrections that need to be made. That's built into their process. So 6 months for them is no big deal. A year? Now, what's interesting is that in other communities, there have been some strong support for this. They have seen some change. What often gets tagged onto this is property right issues. And what I'd like to suggest is that when one says your property is worth this much money, the only time that's ever really proven is when it's sold. Not until that date. Everybody can say, I know how much your property is worth. They're taking a good guess, if you will. And so sometimes that's true, sometimes it isn't. In terms of honorary landmarks, they have gone through a whole process to get to that level. And so they have value to this community. So the idea of layering this on with these other incentives to us makes a lot of sense. Okay, next. Okay.
So, just upon direction after a conversation this evening, we understand that there will likely be some adjustments to the village code. If the village board considers the zoning referral and approves the zoning amendment, that would necessitate some village code updates. If the village board recommends or gives direction that we should adopt some of these incentives, we would have to make some adjustments to the village code. So upon direction, the village staff would work with the village attorney to engage in a rewrite and update. The Historic Preservation Code has been in place since 1990. There's been some subsequent amendments, but a wholesale adjustment has not been made, and likely, depending upon this conversation, wholesale adjustment might be warranted. So we would encompass any sort of elements that would be determined this evening, and then we would present everything as a full and complete package to the village board at a later date if that direction is given. So with that, Peter and I are available for any questions that you might have.
So for honorary, right now, people can ask to have their properties so designated. And they'll, they may have to wait a year to tear down their house if they want to do that ultimately later. But there are also some benefits that we're proposing that would go along with that. My question is, right now on our list, do we have people whose homes were designated that without asking to be designated? And if so, and we're going to put a burden on them, can't sell for a year instead of 6, can't knock it down kind of thing. The property rights issue you just raised. Can we build into whatever we're doing? Because I like the program you guys proposed, by the way. I should have started with that. I think this is really well thought out, very balanced, good ideas. Sorry, should have led with that. I'm a lawyer, what can I say? But could we have something at the front end where we send something out to people whose homes, are honorary certified, explaining what's going on and saying, if you want to opt out and not be certified anymore at all, you've got a X month window. Raise your hand or forever hold your peace. But here are the benefits if you stay in the program.
Good question. To my knowledge, to answer the question, I don't believe there are any homeowners who had this placed on top of them. And I want to make some clarifications here. For certified, all those people are very well aware.
Yes.
And it's practically impossible to tear down their house. I always like to say, unless there's a catastrophic issue, like it burns down, the fireplace is left, that's it. For honorary, what we are also proposing as part of this package is the ordinance modification. Today, there are various paths that can be brought forward for a property to become listed. Some of those do not involve the owner. We are proposing as part of this is to change that so that the owner is part of that process and they are consenting to it. Now, we would also, logically, if this goes forward, be sending a letter to every homeowner, certified and honorary, and also the significant group. But you'll notice we're not having added significant in here. But a letter talking about what these incentives are would go out to those groups, right? The incentives in the new program in terms of just basic information sharing.
Yeah, I think that if we can accommodate somebody saying, oh, that wasn't part of the deal. If that's the new deal, I like it or I don't like it. If we can accommodate that up front, because I doubt. Say no. Then I like I said, I think it's a very, very well thought out package of balanced incentives. Potential detriments. The extra year, once you're in the program, you're going to give the incentive. I think it's perfectly fair.
So the honorary that are in it now have to re-up and agree.
No,
to their
I would say you've re-upped.
To be a new honorary, you have to acquiesce to.
I think we could say you're in it now. If you want to opt out, raise your hand, otherwise.
So the current people cannot.
No response is a yes.
Ooh, did they get money already? The current people, then the current people, or did they not get some kind of benefit?
Certified people get a benefit from the state. They do not get a benefit from
There's a nuance to that. That when the ordinance was written in 1990, both levels could apply to the state for property tax exemption threes. That was changed in 2013, so only the certified landmarks. The reason being was that honorary landmarks applied, received the benefit, but then turned around and had their house torn down a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And the village board felt that was really rude and unfair. And unfair because basically if there's a tax burden that's applied across the community, if someone's paying a little less, then everybody else is subsidizing that. So, okay, that makes sense. Now, there have been honorary landmarks that received that prior to 2013. I remember one Frank Lloyd Wright house that slipped right in underneath. But since then, no. And I have no idea actually the total number of them, or I doubt if any still exist because it's been enough time period to go by.
So you guys have listened to us and you come back with something that is, way more likely to make everybody happy. There is a continuum of views on the board in terms of how much is too much interference with property rights and how much is too little. I almost always agree with Trustee Rubin on stuff, but I don't totally agree with him on this. To me, going from 180 days to 360 days is not that much of an imposition on property rights. I am totally okay with going there, which matches what most of our neighbors have done. I hadn't thought about the fact that 6 months was like zero, but recognizing that 6 months is like, anyway, Trustee Rubin believes that, it's an imposition on property rights to go from 108 days to 360 days. And therefore people ought to be able to opt out of being honorary. Yeah, I don't care. I don't care about that. In my view, so certified is somebody whose home has been identified as being significant architecturally, historically, and they've signed up to maintain that in exchange for some benefits. We're basically not changing that, although we're going to provide some additional benefits if they do it. For honorary, it's people who live in houses that have been identified as being significant historically or architecturally, and they haven't volunteered. They may have, but they may not have. And a lot of what was happening with the Preservation Commission over the last 2 years was trying to come up with a way to deal with those folks and also to deal with related issues about people who paid extra to remodel and should they be paying extra when we're happy they do. For the honorary folks, and we just have to decide what the board thinks. If the majority is with Gary, then we need to say to honorary folks, you have a chance to opt out. From my point of view, this is not that much of an imposition. If you're in a home that's been, it's got to have been designated by the Preservation Commission, got to meet standards that can't just be any old place. But if we've identified it as being historically or architecturally significant, then you're still honorary. And therefore, you're going to have to wait 360 days. If there's a lot of money at stake, the builders will you know, they're gonna say, okay, I'll wait, I'll get my 3 million then. So there's a potential difference that we ought to decide about. We'll just, you know, whatever the majority thinks. I've told you what I think. Gary said what he thinks. And we should decide, and then we can tell the, you know, our lawyers and staff how to write this. I think, I don't know if it's going to work to have these incentives. They seem like serious money to us. They may not be serious money to a homeowner or a builder. They may not, but we should find out. And it can't hurt. I have one tweak. I mentioned this to Peter at one point, may not even remembered it. So the village board in 2013, I wasn't on the board then, none of us were, was offended at people taking the benefit, getting some maybe tax breaks, and then knocking down the house when it was convenient. And I totally agree that that's bad. I would suggest that if we provide any money to a homeowner in a rebate of 10,000 perhaps, or of a waiver of fee, that if that homeowner ever decides to bulldoze the place, we get the money back, all of it. And the way that would be done is you would put some kind of a lien on the property. Because of the time value of money, if somebody bulldozes the house in 40 years, that's going to be peanuts. If they do it in 2 years, we're going to get most of our money back. But I would think we're paying for that historic house to be there, period, not for it to be there for 5 years. So that's a tweak I would propose. I don't want to pay anybody anything, since we're paying for the house not to be knocked down if it gets knocked down. And, you know, of course, there could be an exception if there's a fire and it wasn't ours.
I thought there was in the proposal, exactly that concept.
And there is, and it's part of the concept, and it wouldn't be a lien. It would actually, if the property owner is taking advantage of this, they'll enter into a covenant, a contract with the village that will get recorded against the land, that will run with the land.
Right.
What current proposal is for 10 years.
Okay, so
What I just heard is maybe it should be much longer. Yes.
permanent. And that was what we were talking about. Permanent.
That's easy. That's an easy.
Because I don't, and it is self-executing. If this happens 20 years later, we're the time value money, we're getting a lot less because the 10,000 is only worth 4 or something. But I would, historic preservation, architecturally significant preservation, we want it preserved. We don't want it preserved for 10 years. We don't want it preserved for 20 years. We want it preserved. And you know, that means that's the deal. And you have whoever the owner is has complete control over this. Don't knock it down. And if you do, we get our money back. So there's one potential area where
What if they change hands?
It runs with the land.
it runs with the land.
That's what that means in non-legal talk is whoever purchases the house takes subject to,
But the person doing it up
That's
front
great.
again, knows
Because that
that
person didn't consent.
No,
So
but-
Well, it's in the property.
theoretically they're
When they-
getting the benefit.
when they close, it's disclosed. So they're not entering into it without knowing.
There's
that it
there's
exists.
no surprise. And again, you know, people can sell their house in 2 years, and I just, I mean, you could certainly imagine somebody who would like to do some work on their house in order to sell it for more and get us to pay for their, and I don't want,
that's a different thing.
well, but I'm just saying, from my point of view, if we're paying, we are paying for the house to still be there, period. So
But you're also, you're rebating fees, permit fees for work to be done on the house. So in theory, any successor owner should be receiving the benefit of the work that was done. That's the theory.
So anyway, not 10 years, not 20 years, not 50 years, permanent.
Yeah.
But if it happens in 70 years,
Yep.
it's gonna be,
We won't know about it.
We won't know. We won't, I may not know in 5 years, but at any event, anyway, so the board needs to sort of weigh in on how you feel about whether somebody needs to be able to opt out of the going from 180 to 360. I don't think they need to, but Gary does, and I get that that's just a potential difference. And then I would like to extend the obligation to pay it back in perpetuity.
Might they opt out when they do the reno? If when? Meaning you don't have to avail yourself of the opportunity to.
So that they totally, they're not opting out, they just have to wait for 360 days. In other words, if somebody.
I was thinking more about the incentives for homeowners, like around permitting and things like that.
So, I mean, the purpose, as I understand it, the purpose of the incentive to renovate is as opposed to knocking it down. So, and that's really the decision. And I understood that we've had some people who were sort of public spirited and said, I'm not knocking this architecturally significant house down, but I'm aggravated that I'm paying all this permit money to do my renovation. And is that appropriate when maybe the permit is the same or less if you're knocking it down? And, one thing we probably need to look at is whether we should be charging more for demolitions. And there are a number of reasons why we would be looking at that.
One side response to that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Legal, that an honorary landmark, an owner can apply to have that status withdrawn if the commission agrees to it. I believe they can designate. Yeah.
Part of my confusion, and it's been explained 100 times, so I need to take ownership of that, is the whole honorary landmark designation. Because I know I've been told disputing things about my own property. So to the best of my knowledge, it's not. And I can imagine that must be true for other homeowners. And so I just really want to be clear, and that's why I like Gary's idea that homeowners know that they're just advised of this change that's going to have a significant impact on their lives, property values, etc.
There are about 75 homes that are on the landmark in the village, roughly. They're on the Glencoe Historic Story map online on the website. You can search that to see if your property is. If a property is listed as significant, that is not a landmark. Right?
Honorary or otherwise.
There is certified, there is honorary, and there is significant.
Thank you.
The significant means exactly what it says.
On the story map, but that's it.
You have a significant house.
Yeah.
I'm honored. No. Oh, certifiably.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Ravine Bluffs subdivision, that is the Frank Lloyd Wright subdivision. There are a few certified landmarks. There are a few honorary landmarks, and there are some that are not landmarked at all. All Frank Lloyd Wright houses. The ones that aren't landmarked are significant, arguably. It doesn't mean they have anything to do with what we're talking about right now.
We're really talking about a very small subset of
Yes.
homes. And in what I'm hearing you say is that it would be surprising if any one of those 75 homeowners doesn't have a clue that their home is in some way in this category. That's helpful. That's
I think-
what I'm trying to
I
wrap
think
my mind
that's-
around.
That is a reasonable expectation. But I don't know how 100% accurate it is. People come and go and they move. But I've asked realtors several times this question when a property changes hands. Is there something in the legal documentation or in the realtor information that lets them know, oh, by the way, that Ron's plaque out front, here's why.
Mm.
And that's kind of unclear, but it's reasonable to expect that homeowners understand.
That answers the question. Thank you very much.
And to add to just a little bit of nuance to Peter's statement, the significant properties are those that are identified by the commission that they would like to see become honorary. So obviously, it's something that like would make it easier for a homeowner to become honorary or certified if they so wish. And I think the commission plans to take a look at mid-century modern architecture in the village of Glencoe to determine whether or not some of those properties could be considered historically significant, and then they can ease their way through that process.
But the only stick when we're talking, so the incentives, carrots, there are two incentives. There's the $30,000, $10,000 per project. 3-year period, that's a carrot. There's the waiver of certain fees, that's a carrot. The only stick, and
Excuse me, isn't there also the zoning benefit? There's also zoning.
there's zoning.
Frankly, should be a heck of a lot better and more
Right.
valuable than a couple of bucks. Yeah.
So those are carrots. The only stick is going from 180 to 360 days, which to me, not that much of an infringement of somebody's property rights in my way of thinking, but that's just one vote if there's a tie. So we people need to weigh in on that.
I do. And please, I do, thank you so much for your presentation and for being so thorough. I'm leaning towards Gary's view on allowing a property owner to opt out if possible from the program for becoming honorary to. Yes, I am leaning kind of towards your opinion on that. But I also do want to say, I know there's your website and the story map. If we do go that way and we send a notice out, I would just recommend it be more than just maybe a letter in the mail. Maybe there would be some better, PR or social media or online kind of ways of opting out or viewing my data as a property owner. I think it'd be helpful if it's maybe on the village's website as well.
County votes.
I think that somebody's gonna be part of the program, like the honorary program, they should be able to make the decision on their own. And it shouldn't be a village decision to, so to protect, because what I'm getting from this consultation, so. If you're honorary, can't be designated honorary, you have to be like, you have to agree to it, to volunteer.
That's not been true.
Okay, but
Since 1990. I mean, honorary was the folks who were significant, historically significant architects, exempt properties identified by our commission. They did not necessarily have to agree to it. They weren't it didn't matter if you were honorary. Because there used to be some carrots, some were taken away. The stick was pretty much invisible. It's like maybe go to a meeting, wait 6 months. That was it. That's the way it's been. The stick has, under this proposal, would increase to 360 days.
I'd like to say one word about that. I've been on this commission since 2007 or 8. I cannot think of one example that the commission successfully let and the village board agree to landmark, honorary landmark property without the owner's consent.
But those were under different conditions.
It was a different world then.
That's the only
But
reason.
how many of those people are
Yeah.
still the homeowners?
Right. Yeah, when there was no stick associated with it, fine, call it what you will. But it's the stick has been described is the reason I think somebody ought to at least have an opportunity to raise their hand and say, nah, I don't want that package. You've changed the deal. I want to opt out.
And I don't like the negative consent. And beyond the letter, I think you should be able to go to the website and choose. I just sent my neighbor a note. Do you know you're an honorary? He's like, no, what does that mean? So, I'd say if they want the negative,
Okay,
I
so
don't believe
you're
in
saying best me.
Well, I just don't believe negative consent. Like, you
Okay.
go on the website, not a letter, make it easy for them to approve it
Right.
or opt out.
Like, couple of clicks and you're
A couple of clicks. Most won't.
Just search yourself, look up your address, not just on the- feel like no one maybe people don't know where to go. I didn't even know.
It's confusing. I just did it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm doing it now.
So we're transparent. Beneficial.
Okay,
For me, I live in a. And I don't know, I haven't talked to the village attorney about whether I could participate in this discussion or vote on it.
Not a problem, no problem.
No problem, okay. But we did come through the process, I think it was 2017, we came through the process. And I have a real interest in historic properties. And fallen in love with the house and wanted to leave that as part of our legacy for the future. And, quite frankly, I invested a lot of money in the house. It's a 100-year-old house. And, I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, if you come to visit, probably one of the first things I will show you is the plaque on the wall. That says it's an honorary landmark. And we're very proud of that. So I support.
I counted noses. So, and I think the noses say that people should, I don't know that we have a consensus, but they should be either able to opt in or opt out of honorary if we're going to increase to 360-day donation. That was my view, but I got outvoted on that one. So,
And I'm okay with Joe's proposal, but I would like to make it as simple as possible, like go online, you can click yes or no. And people can call to follow up, but if people don't respond at all, okay, but
They
if they.
email the village and have us do it for, I want to put out something.
No, it's 75 and if they're
No,
really just.
not
keep
everybody
blowing
opens
us
up
off.
paper mail.
Oh, no, I get that. And some people will think it's a fishing expedition to get you to go on and do something and get trapped on it too, so. I think with a little follow-up, I'd be surprised if we did.
Yeah, I actually have an issue with opting in. They've gone through a process with the village. They might not have been the owner at the time, but they went through a process and they're a landmark. And whether they moved in, they're not aware of it, that's a whole different issue. But you open it up and say, I want to opt into it, to me, it's like, it undermines the whole the whole commission's, what we're doing. And so I understand, I think, the idea of opting out because I don't want to become a part of that stick. I do not understand at all needing to opt into something that's already in existence.
I don't think we said that.
I heard that. I heard
No,
that.
that's Joe. Joe is saying. you
Well,
need
I'm
to
saying
opt in.
my neighbor doesn't know that he has,
Yeah.
right, so.
Who's opting out.
But I think we can make sure that they all clearly know they can opt
And they
out.
have to, somebody have to explain them the benefits to this and what it means to them, because they don't know.
Right.
They've been there for 15 years. They didn't just move there.
Saying about opting, his neighbor wasn't aware I was opting out. He wasn't saying about
I heard opt in or opt out.
I don't feel strongly about it because I was fine with
I
that.
totally agree. There needs to be more communication with the homeowners because there's been turnover of ownership. I heartily agree with that. And what we were trying to do was to get this whole program to move forward so we would have some things to put into the communications with them. Sending a note that you're an honorary landmark all by itself. Like, okay, fine, next.
Right.
Sending a note that says you're an honorary landmark. There's been some recent changes that you can think about taking advantage of.
Mhm.
That's
Eligible
kind
for
of,
all these benefits.
Yeah.
that's what we've been kind of waiting for.
That's why I'd be real surprised if people are
I
opting
was
out,
just
because I
gonna
think
say.
the package is quite
Yes.
persuasive, especially with the zoning.
Absolutely.
And we've been, honestly, we were going to do this in 2020, and then a pandemic hit. So it got tabled for the last 6 years. But we've also been talking about this conversation for some time. So if this moves forward, I assure you, this will be the top of the agenda for the commission. I assure you of that.
So I just want to count opt in. Out.
No, it'll be opt-in.
Okay, all
I'll be
right.
out, I'm sorry.
All right, so we have a consensus on opting out. And I think we have a consensus on the rest. Let me throw out one other thing. That you're not gonna know the answer to. None of us knows the answer. But we probably all noticed that the governor has proposed and the legislature has, there have been things introduced, stuff that is gonna supersede local zoning in a whole bunch of ways. Okay, I don't love this because, we get to do zoning and we kind of like having control over our little burg here. And then there are potential traps. And one of the traps I worry about is the legislation ending up saying something like, well, you have certain setbacks, and we're going to leave those alone to a certain extent. But if you make exceptions to your setbacks, we're going to assume that you can live with that exception. So is the legislation going to say that? I don't know. But one thing I do worry about is that we're now creating an exception for operating and certified to our local setbacks. And one thing I do worry about is, there's a big, right now, I think the legislation just says we're overruling all the setbacks, here's the new setback. But you can imagine a back and forth in which the local municipalities are given more authority. But, it says, if you've agreed to a 30% reduction, then we're going to deem that agreed, period, full stop. So I do worry about that. And I don't know what to do about it, but I worry about it.
It's an excellent, can I respond as best I can?
Yeah.
I've obviously looked a lot at this issue quite a bit.
I read all your memos. And that was
Right,
part
and
of
you're not
my-
the first of our clients to ask it, but you're actually asking it in a little interesting, in a different way. Many are saying, should we even bother with doing anything now? The answer that I give to them is, of course, you should proceed. This is a proposal. Some part of it I do think is likely to pass in being introduced by somebody who's known to bet the odds, and he's done quite well betting the odds, and he has two houses that are in his same party. So I think that there's a likelihood of success of some of it. There will be strong resistance. I wouldn't stop anything we're doing. I like the spin, Howard, that you put on the question, and that is, are we doing something that likely could suffer in what will likely be negotiations? I think my answer is going to be the same. I wouldn't stop any activity now. I'd be aware of it, but I think that the kind of agreement to a reduced setback that we're doing is the quid pro quo for getting a house preserved. That preservation is not going to go away with the governor's proposed legislation. So we've received our benefit. We may have to live with a new setback, even under a negotiated compromise to the Build Illinois proposal. So in all, I would not stop any action that you think is important and necessary now.
Okay.
But it's a very good question.
Okay. But none of us knows what's gonna happen with this legislation and whether we'll still be in the zoning business, but we already are not in the parking space business, the parking, business. And okay, all right, I think there should be guidance based on this presentation for what we want staff and our lawyers to do. I think we would do.
Yes, we do have guidance. I'll be working with the village attorney and we'll bring something forward at a later date
Okay.
for consideration.
All right.
Thank you.
Peter's and his preservation commission have been working on this for a long time. And I think they may have thought they were getting the back of the hand from the village board, but it turns out you weren't.
You got
Thank you for that, I think.
Thank you for all the hard work, and let's give it, like I said, we'll see if this works. But let's give it a shot.
Thank you all.
Okay. All right. The next item is discussion of the Glenview Public Safety Dispatch Center drone as first responder pilot program. DFR must be drone first responder.
Got it.
Wow.
It's like we've already been.
Wow. Okay. And our public safety director.
Self-aware. Does anybody need a stand before we move on? So I wanted to provide you with a brief overview and a briefing as far as and answer any questions in regards to the program underway that is being spearheaded by our dispatcher services. I know a number of you have been involved in local government for some time. Some of you have not, we're not here. In regard to our dispatcher. So the Glenview Public Safety Dispatch Center, since July 2027 or 2017 rather, has been providing all of our dispatch services as determined by state law, based on population. If you were dispatching your own law enforcement dispatchers, are mandated to come together to standardize a larger dispatching system. And with that, we entered into an agreement with Glenview. They provide dispatching services to 15 different communities in the region, at 2 different locations, effectively 22 different departments, both police and fire. We had a very, very strong partnership with them that they're going swimmingly. As a measure of expansion of their services, they're looking to create this pilot program, launch this pilot program in which this DFR system would automatically launch based on a call type, which I'll go into detail with, and where their anticipated, their promise is they will be overhead for the geolocation, all where the location where the call came from within 2 minutes, through a series of pre-planned staged launch sites throughout the region. Now, since I prepared this memorandum with an overview, some details have changed, so I can go into that. The PowerPoint itself has been updated, but the memorandum, the information is a little different. If you're familiar with when we launched our old pilot program following the Park tragedy in October 22, that's when our program launched in October of 2022. Laws were very restricted. Just to highlight, the law itself is called the Freedom from Drone Surveillance Act. It tells you in very rare instances when a law enforcement entity can utilize a drone.
which we comply with the law, and that's what we do primarily for pre-planned events and looking for missings. Very, very rare occasions. Since then, Illinois state has opted to amend the law and now called the Drones as a First Responder Act. So it gives a very specific carve out of when drones can be utilized in this fashion. If you're familiar with this concept, this is largely based on Chula Vista, California. Chula Vista, California started doing this back in 2017, started launching it based on, they looked at it from lower tier calls first. What they were looking to do was looking to use this as essentially to cut their response times, but also in truth as a force reduction strategy. They had a hard time filling spots. So this is a way of sending a drone overhead to see if, do you really need the police? Okay, you don't really need the police. That's not what this is. This is specifically the law. I can read you 3 very, very specific occasions, but consider it's actually very broad. It allows use of a drone in one or more first responders to locate victims. So to help assist one or more first responders to locate victims, or to assist with immediate victim health or safety needs, or to coordinate the response of public or of emergency vehicles and personnel to emergencies. So that's pretty broad. So Glenview, in the discussion with Glenview as essentially the provider or the go-between for the provider, they started doing extensive research. They looked at several different providers. As highlighted, they looked at Axon, Skydio. Axon is the body-worn camera. The providers that we use and pretty much the industry standard. Paladin DFR and Flock DFR, which we're all familiar with Flock. Flock is primarily getting most meetings as technology. In looking at those 3, and there was an additional one that was represented them from a Sourcewell they did not look at or did not review extensively. Flock became the best option, largely based on their cost structure and also their offering of a 6-month no obligation free trial. So with that said, looking at that. It was originally laid out as 8 different launch sites throughout the area of interconnecting. And again, that would allow that drone to be overhead within 2 minutes. Once that is overhead, that could then, that transfer of that command could be directly handed off to a pilot either remote at Glenview, or they can pass it off to one of us on the scene. And then you could directly what Glenview is intending on sending those out as of right now, their specific use of would be for on the EMS side, it would be traffic crashes with reported injuries, working fire-related calls, and outdoor fire responses. The last one, outdoor fire response, which includes missing persons on mobile phone. For police responded, for police response, they were looking at all in-progress calls and most, if not all, medium to high priority incidents. So that's pretty broad. Now, since this initial offer, there were 14 different municipalities or agencies that were interested. That dropped down to now, as of yesterday, 7 municipalities are interested. The commonality in talking with chiefs and different members of local government is the cost associated. When there were 8 different launch sites, it was an overall $400,000 cost to be shared by all the municipalities involved. Now they've scaled it down to 7 launch sites, one of which is going to be on top of the building here. In its proposal, it's with an overall $350,000 cost per year. Again, however, the 6-month representative, the 6-month trial period is no cost, even if we opt out very last day. After that, if we are in the agreement of $50,000 per agency, a flat fee of $18,000. I immediately went to dollars and cents. This is a good tool, but then it also has to be, there's a cost to it, right? Based on the generalized information, these are our numbers, not Glenview's numbers. They were not able to provide me the specific data they feel they would be launching it. Based on their general description, this is what we pulled. In 2024, there will be 497 police-related jobs and 102 fire-related jobs that we will be launching this on. 2025 data shows a little less, 415 police-related jobs and 92 fire-related jobs. That average, if it comes down to that average, would be roughly $90.42 per fire. Bear that in mind, that's what it costs. So, now, we already maintain a fleet of 2 drones, and we would still maintain, we would still need to maintain 2. Because there are instances where we would want to have a direct launch ourselves. We have 6 pilots, where we launched it outside of public demonstrations and training flights. We launched in response to assignments 9 times last year. There's not much, this is a free option. It's something that is, it's an opportunity. Quite frankly, I'm surprised more communities aren't seeing it for exactly that. But as it is now, this would give us an opportunity to be overhead and explore this as an option. My anticipation is at the end of the 6-month time period, I think some other municipalities are going to be dropping out. I think the cost is going to change. From when it started, our initial cost based on the analysis was a little over $25,000, and it's doubling since the other municipalities dropped. That said,
And that is only if we elect to opt into it outside of pilot program.
beyond
Pilot
the power,
program has no cost associated.
So I think this is an asset and I would like to have it, but you know, how much do we want to spend? So to me, the decision is, since we have our own, you know, could we do our own thing? Will the new statute allow us to do our own thing at a lower cost than participating with Glencoe? And to me, that's the question, because otherwise, I want to do this. I don't want, you know, going the discount route is okay until we have a disaster, and then everybody's gonna say, "What? You know, you're waiting for you. You just had a disaster. You weren't prepared. You didn't find out. Whatever. I just don't want that." So to me, the only question is, do we need to spend 50 or 60, or can we do it equivalently with what we currently have?
and I apologize if I wanted to provide an overview. I wasn't necessarily asking for a commitment for anyone now. I
Yeah,
just
well,
wanted to give as
it's
much
free.
information.
It's free for now anyway, so we're certainly doing that.
Yeah, so that said, to answer your first question, can we do the same thing as represented? No, the answer is no. We would have to dedicate a person 24 hours a day ready to launch at all times. So, and forgive me again, because so in my former life, I was actually tasked to try to stand something up, this exact same program up in a different municipality. The technology just wasn't there. So that said, what the flock system and all these systems are, it is a climate controlled environment. So basically a box on top of a building, a municipal building in a centralized location that upon automatically, they would use AI automatically open up and launch. Will be overhead, and then they're promising us it would have a flight time of 60 minutes. In reality, that's going to be probably much less, especially in weather conditions. Colder it is, the shorter the time. In the event that you still need it in the air, it will be replaced. It would come back, automatically change batteries, fly back out, but also it would be passing other drones that will be launching from other similar sites, allowing you to pass it off. That said, it's intended to put eyes on above, and really is of value if someone is remotely piloting it, say from Glencoe, and not costing us a person in the field, because personnel are safe as we are all, we're all operating with peak efficiency. You don't want to take somebody out of play, and that's what you're doing, especially if you're taking an officer out of play to pilot one of those 6 individuals that are already trained. So short answer is no, we wouldn't be able to accomplish the same. This would be an option, but I truly feel like once we explore this, we'll have a lot more.
Okay, well, I just to add to the chief's point on that, I think the struggle he and I are also having is the cost benefit. right? And the value of a pilot program is to establish at least some baseline data and to understand whether we saw value in those dollars, potentially spending them in the future, if it generated enough value in that way. And so the risk at this point is low. I would say it's hard to know exactly why other communities have elected not to move forward. And that's up to them, obviously. But I would say as we sit down to look at a budget draft in October, we will have a lot more information at that point as to whether or not we think it's worth recommending moving forward. There's a pretty low risk threshold with a pilot program.
Just a clarifying question, because something you said, you felt like new information to me based on earlier conversations. Is the cost for the program regardless, so that fewer municipalities that participate, the more expensive it is for us? It's basically it's socialized amongst whomever participates.
That's, yeah, there are.
So that's why it's
That's how they
germane
built it
that
out,
people
yes.
are 14 to 7.
It was
is-
initially recommended, it was at one of the meetings we had, we initially recommended, say, one of the neighboring communities has a much lower call volume. It makes no sense for them to pay the same amount as other, and they might only need it a handful of times a year. So that was originally determined based on call volume. Since so many different agencies have dropped out, they've then elected for this pay structure. That may change again. And as of right now, of those 7 municipalities that are trying this pilot program, only 2, Morton Grove and Niles, are steadfast and they will be participating in this. So they really are behind the program. I do see a value in it, but again, it also really comes down to the cost. If it's
Do opt-outs think they'll be able to free ride? In other words, okay, we're not in, but
Right.
hey, chief, we've had a disaster here.
It's
Yeah,
that's a conversation, and there was also a pay-as-you-go conversation. You know, I don't envision we flying the drone and asking for a credit card number, but that is an option. But and that was also again for consideration. We all manage our various crises by borrowing a cup of sugar from our neighbors.
Yeah.
All of us work together. So that's the common theme throughout the region. I would hope in a program like this, it would be all of us or none of us. That said, if I'm sending the squad or the engine to go fight a structure fire in a municipality that is a bona fide fire, and there's a risk to our personnel, I would want that 360 view from the air. I would want that battalion chief who's running that scenes, even if it's not from our municipality. I would want them to have that tool at their disposal. That said, there's an indication as of right now they would not fly that drone to the municipality.
All right, well, so we're gonna have to think about all of this in 6 months, but it's a no-brainer now. And I just, for me personally, I want to take advantage of the technology we can take advantage of for the benefit of our residents. We will obviously have, but we'll see in 6 months. And then we'll have to find out which of our neighbors are trying to free ride.
And one last point that I failed to mention, the anticipated launch is July 1st.
So 6 months from then.
In 6 months, and then it's when we would really have
Okay,
this,
so
it's aligned up.
so it's really, so it'll be next year's budget is when we have to make budgets.
We'll have enough information, I think, by the time we present a budget to the board in October to be able to say whether it seems like it's been worthwhile or not. Several months under our belt.
Okay. All right.
Question.
I think you could start by persuade others to join.
Question. We have a police study that's underway. Is that correct?
Staffing analysis?
Staffing now.
We do.
Yeah. Would this have an impact on staffing? The numbers you're talking about are probably 2 officers, maybe less than that.
So these would be live in the moment where an author or a trained pilot would take control of that. And there would be a need to establish.
Good.
So it would not negatively impact our staffing in the field. And it's not offered as a staffing reduction, like it wouldn't take place in the place of an officer. It would only augment our ability to respond and give live information, potentially before somebody gets. So how it would potentially lay out. This might. An in-progress call, crime of violence and domestic violence incidents. The drone is launched, it's overhead before officers are seen, live information, and it can relay you have a offender or you have a person who's running from the back door and they're running through the yards going in this direction, whatever the case is. Then that would help those officers respond to the scene, and locate that offender. Or in another case, probably a more likely case, thankfully in Glencoe, you have a multiple car accident. It's overseen, indicating injuries. It flies over. Okay, you have 3 cars, and there's clearly 4 people that need medical attention. So that would allow us to respond and also ask for assistance from other ambulances from other municipalities to have a more rapid response for medical attention.
Second question, does it automatically record the event too?
So it would, yes, as I understand, yes. And the laws governing retention of that are still in place. This is the amendment allowing us to apply it in such a fashion, or law enforcement entities in particular, to apply it in such a fashion where the addition. However, there's nothing that allows us to retain data or information. There was no change to the law as far as that goes. We had no capability to retain. And there's still a mandatory reporting, how many times it's flown, still a number of, all those things, those oversights or steps of oversight are still in place.
It's still.
Okay.
If you're,
Well, I was gonna say, I think pilot program gets 2 thumbs up from us. I'm curious to see how it works, and I hope that, kind of how often, see if it does play out. Would it create any kind of extra administrative burden on staff to report on, let's say, so many flights? I'm just curious
No,
what that would create.
Good question. As of right now, there is a mandatory reporting to the Attorney General, which then is broadcast out across the state in the interest of transparency. It's done once a year. We actually just came to compliance with that, which Lieutenant Pedroza does that out of our drone program. That's for our own individual flights. One of the things that I asked when we first started is, whose responsibility is it going to be for that? And as the individual who's going to be essentially providing that service, or as the pass off provider of service, Glenview will own that
So our
responsibility.
staff won't have to, great, okay.
And that was my worry as well. If we're going to try to get that time.
I was just curious, in your estimate with your peers, where's your break point in terms of geography or size of your municipality of in-source versus outsource? So like, would Evanston stand up their own program with a person 24 hours a day? Or is Evanston too small?
Nobody.
Is this eventually going to be the future where people wouldn't have their own? Is it evolving too fast to know?
Well, it is evolving. It is evolving very fast. There was an article that actually both Mayor and I were sharing over today. It indicated that there are upwards of over 1,500 different agencies coast to coast that have DFR programs right now.
Their
However,
own or shared?
Well, it just, the article said, a little more digging was actually, there's 1,500 different agencies that have drone programs. DFR is still pretty new. It's still pretty new, but that is the way it's all trending. It is, it's trending in the direction of trying to to leverage technology, AI, to be more efficient. What this is not, and again, what I wanted to make sure is this is not an interest of force reduction, because a drone in the air is great for information. It's an addition. It does not replace a human being.
No, I'm with you. I'm more thinking that it feels like we're not big enough to have our own. And at some point we would want, and maybe we do want some drones of our own for some things that an individual officer might have maybe in his car.
Yeah.
Which we do have
Training on that.
We have two drones.
Yeah,
But this is something different.
This is 100% different. This is to give us eyes in the sky in regards to high critical incidents.
Probably bigger, faster, heavier drones.
100%. They fly upwards of, depending on weather conditions, 55 miles.
I was gonna say that's.
Yeah.
So what I think we will be able to do is leading in, we want to try to squeeze this closed session in if we can. Leading into the budget process, when we come back to you, we will talk through some of the nuts and bolts of the program and get a bit more data around it. Trustee Hallwax, your question is a really good one. I would say it's a long time away from a community like Glencoe from having something on our own. but regionally it may work. So
So, we're gonna try to talk fast. Is there a motion to go into closed session? To get out there for C21, closed session minutes, and 2C1 personnel.
Second.
We did roll call.
oh, sorry, trustee Hallwax,
Yes.
trustee Mealopolis,
Yes.
trustee Underdog.
Yes.
Trustee Rosenblatt.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Scott.
Yes.
Motion carries. We're going into closed session. So any interlopers who aren't supposed to be in closed session,